Hi everybody, this is a recording of a short presentation I recently gave to an international real estate conference held in September 2023 in Sri Lanka. The presentation is a quick introduction on how we calculate compensation in the UK for compulsory purchase and was intended for a foreign audience. I'm not going to go into too much depth regarding UK law when it comes to calculating compensation. It is interesting from a historical point of view. There are acts of parliament regarding canal construction going back to the 18th century, and then later on, there were some laws regarding railway construction in the 19th century. And of course, there's been layers of common law. Perhaps the only thing I should say here is that in the UK, we have no one single law covering compulsory purchase, no compulsory purchase code, unlike other European countries where procedure will be written into one single expropriation statute. We instead have a series of laws or parliamentary acts as well as common law to guide us. Quite often we have decisions from judges that will later be written into law. And here we can see some comments from judges in past cases, each supporting the idea that equivalence, which frankly is worldwide, is the overriding guiding principle behind determining appropriate compensation for affected parties. That is, those who are affected should be no better and no worse off after the action as they were before. So, who qualifies for compensation? What are the reasons you might be able to get compensation? Well, the obvious one to start with is that anybody who has land taken away from them, noting that land in our sense also means buildings and extends the right to use land and buildings. Doesn't necessarily have to be a freehold. A lease would also be considered an interest in land, although it would probably have to be some sort of long lease for there to be any value in that lease. Land could, of course, just be the whole of the land, or it could be part of the land. So there could be compensation where part of the land is taken. Something we call in the UK severance. Could be a claim for severance, and I'll talk about that shortly. There may also be situations where no land is taken, but new works, new infrastructure affect some existing rights. A new road, a new airport, a new railway, new tram line may be associated with an extra, nuisance from sound that affects nearby homeowners. There could be exhaust fumes, there could be smell as well. So those owners, those affected parties may be able to also put in a claim. So those are the three main claim situations. Some claimants will be able to put a claim in for a disturbance. That is claiming for additional cost that has been occurred due to the CPO scheme. And I could stress here that it is some claimants, not all claimants. Finally, and possibly not so important to a foreign audience, is that there are certain other items that can be claimed. Legal costs, for example, costs with preparing a claim if you need an appraiser or a valuer. What about if you you're forced to sell an investment and you want to replace that investment, then there'll be additional costs with that. That can also be claimed within certain rules. If you've had a home taken away from you and you qualify by living there for longer than 12 months, and you can also claim a home loss payment, for example. So heads of claim, basic, as I said, land taken, probably the more obvious one. Then severance and or injurious affection. This is when part of land is taken or where no land is taken. And then there's disturbance. These are the sort of the three main heads of claim. And then there's the other claimable items as well. This is how we basically set out compensation claims. When it comes to thinking about land taken, how do we calculate? Well, we follow 6 basic rules. pretty straightforward rules. And first of all, it means that things like the market value is generally the basis. We don't allow for the fact the seller is compelled, even though in reality they are compelled. This is important because up until I believe 1919, it was customary to add on a percentage to entice the owner to sell, to just to say the fact that it is under compulsion. We also have to ignore the effects of the scheme. It could be that whatever is being built might increase values. So also the compensation will only be based on the legal use for the building, and that could be what it's actually physically used for or what it has planning permission for. And no matter what compensation is given, the claimant will always or should still, if they qualify, be entitled to an amount for disturbance. The acquiring authority can't simply say, well, we've already given you all this money, that'll include your disturbance, but actually disturbance is going to be a separate item. One other thing to note in the UK is that sometimes claimants may also ask to have their compensation based on equivalent reinstatement. This could be typically something like a religious organisation, community centre, private clubs, typically with the value of their building and land would not be enough for them to continue their activity in an alternative place, because alternative places are more expensive than the value of the building that they currently occupy. We'll look at a bit more at situations where only part of land is taken and where no land is taken at all. This is the second claim heading, severance and injurious affection. Although perhaps you could argue that severance and injurious affection should be different claim headings themselves. Severance occurs when part of the land is taken and there's damage to the remaining land due to being smaller or shape and layout that makes it less valuable. For example, it could be harder to put farm machinery on an unusually shaped land, or perhaps development opportunities are reduced. If we look at this photo here on the right, we can see that there's got this large original plot of land bound in yellow, suitable for a new residential scheme, say a large apartment block, and then an authority comes along, takes part of it, say takes all of plot A, and the owner is compensated for that by the development value of that land for those potential apartments, so that is fine. But they're left with plot B, and this is much smaller and only suitable for a few individual houses. So that land is worth less in that situation than it was before, and that would give rise to a claim for severance. I can think of situations also where no land is taken, but there is injury to the property from the scheme. And I stress here that UK law isn't ideal, it's not perfect here. It recognises two forms of injury, one caused by the execution of works, as in the mere existence of the scheme, and the other caused from depreciation to property caused by the subsequent use of works. And this can be these can be somewhat difficult to quantify, at least the proportion of damage that is derived from each. So the former would be, say, when a private right is lost, access to your driveway, for example, due to a new scheme coming along. They might not be taking any land, they might be widening a road, meaning that traffic will move too quickly, that it's unsafe to enter your driveway. They've not taken any land of your land, but you can no longer use it. That would be a damage caused by the execution of works. That's a reason to claim there. Your property without a driveway may be worth a bit less. And the other would be physical factors. This is, well, in that same example, we have a road, and it could be more and more traffic makes the property worth a bit less, and this can be due to the defined physical factors. And I've written them here: noise, vibration, smell, fumes, smoke, artificial lighting, and the discharge into the land in respect which the claim is made of any solid or liquid substance. You look at this photograph here. Here we've got maybe a new railway line backing up against a building, and that railway, that could cause depreciation of value prompted by physical factors. It could be the sound of the new train lines, the nuisance of people, making that property worth a bit less, even though no land has been taken from the owners of that building. And as we come to the end, of this presentation, I'll talk a little bit about disturbance. I noted earlier that the rules for disturbance state that this is separate from any payment paid to land taken. To qualify, you need to be both expropriated and dispossessed. And this is the sort of subtle difference here. Those claimants who perhaps you're a landlord and your property is being expropriated, you will not qualify for a disturbance payment. The tenant of that property who are being moved out, physically moved out of that property, will qualify for disturbance. I mean, the landlord, of course, can claim other items, reinvestment costs, lost payments, etc., but that's not quite within the scope of this presentation. So what are disturbance costs? Obvious examples, probably moving costs, paying for a removal company to take your belongings and furniture to a new house. Costs could be broad, could be many things. Having your mail redirected, utility connections, disconnections in old property. If there's a business itself being expropriated, there may be a loss for that business due to trading lower, trying to sell stock while you move away, or even completely winding up the business. There could be a claim there also based on goodwill. Okay. You might have to sell stuff if your furniture in your existing property won't fit into your new property. It may have to be sold at auction, and there is a duty there to mitigate loss. And there's going to be a difference between the value of items and the auction sale proceeds in this case, and that could be the amount for the claim. There are other items, of course. That's a separate heading. It's not really relevant to those outside the UK, but of course, just to say that as I've been speaking through this presentation, I've mentioned a couple of lost payments. Also, the sort of reinvestment fees, or even the fees for your valuer, your surveyor, or your legal fees. There could be stamp duties to pay. There could be mortgage arrangement costs on a new property. All this can be claimed. It's all connected with a new property. And finally, it gives rise to those sort of issues that are worth thinking about as we work through compulsory purchase cases. Now, this is somewhat philosophical, but these are good things that we should be thinking about no matter which legal jurisdiction we're in. And that's how are we arriving at a suitable level of compensation? Can it always be monetary, or can we give alternative land to affected people? Must be use the recognised basis of value. Is market value appropriate, or should it be something like worth or investment value to the owner? What do we do when we can't identify land ownership, or those who are occupying a property occupy through insecure tenure? We've got some tenure issues there. What about if there's very few market transactions? That makes it also difficult to come up with a value. What about if that affected party is vulnerable? And this is a big one. You mentioned that I mentioned in the first issue there, can it be monetary? Do we just simply go to the owners and give them an amount of money, an amount of cash, simply simply take their property off them and leave them onto the streets? Or are they going to be left in a situation which will have what we call unsatisfactory outcomes? These are all things worth thinking about as we work through compulsory purchase cases. And that's all for me, and I want to thank you all for listening.